The weight of the badge. The afternoon sun hung low over Westbrook, casting long shadows across the cracked pavement, where Officers Daniels and Mitchell walked their routine patrol. 8 years on the force had transformed their once eager smiles into hardened masks of indifference. Their academy graduation photos still hung in the precinct hallway, a reminder of who they'd been before endless domestic disputes, paperwork, and bureaucratic nonsense had worn them down. "Remember that armed robbery call last week?" Mitchell asked, adjusting his belt. "Turned out to be a kid with a water gun, fourth false alarm this month." Daniels nodded, the weight of disappointment familiar. "Chief's got us walking the same 6 blocks, while narcotics gets all the real action. Sometimes I wonder why we even bother." Their radios crackled with static. Another noise complaint 3 blocks over. Routine, predictable, safe. 10 more years until pension," Mitchell muttered. "Just keep your head down and—" A sharp cry interrupted him. 20 yards ahead, an elderly woman stumbled, her pristine white blouse catching the light as she fell. Her shoulder bag hit the ground, spilling its contents across the sidewalk. Keys, wallet, reading glasses, a folded handkerchief embroidered with delicate blue flowers. She braced herself against the concrete, wincing as she tried to rise. Daniels froze, then a chuckle slipped out, low and unintended. Mitchell caught it, his own laughter erupting in a loud burst that echoed off the nearby storefronts. "Gravity, 1, senior citizen, 0, Daniels quipped, the joke filling the emptiness he'd carried all day. Mitchell grinned. A real trip down memory lane. Their amusement faded as a young woman darted from the gathering crowd, kneeling beside the fallen figure. She gently helped the elderly woman sit up, checking her scraped hands with genuine concern. Standing, she shot the officers a glare sharp enough to cut through their uniforms. "How could you?" Her voice trembled with fury. "Is this what we're supposed to expect from our police?" The young woman's words sliced through their cocoon of cynicism. Daniel's smirk vanished. Mitchell opened his mouth, then closed it, his bravado faltering under her stare. The crowd's murmurs grew louder, disapproving, accusatory. A man shook his head. A child tugged at his mother's sleeve, pointing. The officers shifted, suddenly aware of the weight of their badges. "Should we help?" Mitchell whispered, uncertainty replacing his earlier confidence. Before Daniels could answer, the crowd closed ranks around the fallen woman, deliberately shutting out the officers who had failed in their duty to serve and protect. Later that evening, at O'Malley's bar, where off-duty officers gathered, Daniels nursed a beer, the afternoon's incident playing on repeat in his mind. "You two really stepped in it today," Officer Lopez said, sliding onto the neighboring stool. "That video's already got 5,000 views." Daniels nearly choked. "What video?" Lopez turned her phone screen toward him. There they were, 2 officers of the law, laughing as an elderly woman lay injured on the sidewalk. The comments below the post were brutal, justified, but brutal. "Who was she anyway?" Mitchell asked, peering over Daniel's shoulder at the footage. Lopez shrugged. "Some old lady. Does it matter?" It didn't, Daniels realized. That was the problem. They'd stopped seeing people as individuals with stories and struggles. When had that happened? By morning, the incident had spread through Westbrook like wildfire. Coffee shops buzzed with hushed outrage. Grocers swapped stories over the clatter of carts. The police, once revered as guardians of a proud community, now faced whispers of doubt. Parents eyed patrol cars warily. Elderly residents felt a pang of unease where trust once stood unshaken. At the precinct, Daniels and Mitchell felt the shift the moment they stepped inside. The usual morning chatter died. Colleagues avoided their gaze, offering only cold nods. As they reached their desks, the weight of unseen eyes pressed down. They'd become the precinct's pariahs overnight. "Chief wants to see you," Sergeant Reyes announced, her voice tight with disapproval. "Now!" The walk to Chief Harrison's office felt like a death march. Inside, the chief sat stone-faced, the viral video paused on his computer screen. "Explain," he said, the single word heavy with disappointment. They couldn't. There was no explanation that wouldn't sound like an excuse. "We screwed up, sir," Daniels admitted. "We were wrong." Chief Harrison studied them, his fingers steepled beneath his chin. "Do you know who she is?" They shook their heads. "Find out," he ordered. "Then make it right. Your jobs depend on it." Back at their desks, they searched every database. Names, addresses, incident reports. But the woman remained a mystery. Exhausted, Daniels wandered into the precinct's archives, seeking a break among the dusty shelves of forgotten cases and community records. A worn leather album caught his eye, its cover emblazoned with gold lettering, Westbrook Rising, Community Heroes, 1985. He flipped through the yellowed pages, then stopped. A black and white photo stared back, a younger version of the woman they had mocked, her eyes bright with purpose, standing among a group of celebrated residents. Clara Winters, the caption read, whose tireless efforts following the Mill Street fire helped rebuild Westbrook's historic downtown. Further pages revealed more. Clara had coordinated shelter for dozens of displaced families, established a recovery fund that raised over $300,000, and later served on the city council for 15 years. She wasn't just a random elderly woman, she was Westbrook's backbone. Daniels rushed back, the album clutched in his hands. Mitchell, look at this. Mitchell's jaw tightened as he read. They hadn't just mocked a stranger, they'd ridiculed a woman the city once hailed as a hero. Guilt gnawed at them, sharp and unrelenting. "We need to find her," Mitchell said. "Not because the chief ordered it, but because it's right." That evening, they stood outside Clara's modest Victorian home, the air thick with tension. Daniels knocked, his knuckles hesitant against the painted wood. The door creaked open, and Clara appeared, her gaze a mix of surprise and wariness. Without her pain and their uniforms as barriers, she seemed smaller, more vulnerable, and somehow stronger. "Officers," she acknowledged, her voice steady. "What can I do for you?" "Mrs. Winters," Daniels began, removing his cap. "We came to apologize. What we did yesterday, laughing when you fell, it was unprofessional and unkind. We were wrong." Mitchell nodded, his eyes meeting hers directly. "We failed you as officers and as people. There's no excuse." Their words hung in the air between them, raw and earnest. Clara studied them, saying nothing for a long moment that stretched their nerves thin. "Do you know why that moment hurt so much?" she finally asked. "Not the fall, the laughter." They shook their heads. "Because 60 years ago, when my husband joined the force, he made me a promise. He said the badge meant something, that wearing it meant you'd always be the first to help, not the last." Her voice softened. "He died keeping that promise, during the Mill Street fire." The revelation hit like a physical blow. Not only had they mocked a community hero, but the widow of a fallen officer. "Mrs. Winters," Mitchell said, voice cracking, "we didn't know." "Of course you didn't," she replied. "But that's the point. You didn't need to know who I was to help me. The badge should have been enough." Her wisdom disarmed them. She didn't rage or demand penance. She offered understanding, a chance to mend what they'd broken. Sensing their genuine remorse, she gestured them inside, where photos of her husband in uniform lined the walls alongside commendations and community awards. Over tea in her living room, Clara shared stories of Westbrook's history, of neighbors who'd rebuilt after disasters, of teachers who'd fought for the city's youth, and of officers who'd once known every resident by name. "The city's changed," she admitted, "but people's need for protectors hasn't." As they listened, something long dormant stirred in both officers. The idealism that had first drawn them to the academy, the belief that they could make a difference. When they left Clara's home that night, they carried more than guilt. They carried purpose. The following weeks saw subtle shifts. Daniels and Mitchell began stopping to chat with shopkeepers, learning names and concerns. They helped elderly residents cross busy intersections, played impromptu basketball with neighborhood kids, and started a coffee meetup at the local diner where residents could voice concerns directly. These weren't grand gestures, just steady efforts to rebuild connections that cynicism had eroded. The community noticed. Gradually, nods of acknowledgement replaced suspicious glances. Children waved from school bus windows. The invisible wall between officers and citizens began to crumble. At the precinct, change came slower. Trust among colleagues wasn't easily regained, but persistence slowly thawed the ice. When Daniels proposed a community outreach program focused on senior safety, Lopez, their most vocal critic, surprisingly volunteered to help. 3 months after the incident, Clara Winters sat on a park bench watching the first officer walk and talk, where seniors paired with officers for morning strolls through Westbrook Park. Chief Harrison stood beside her, observing as Officers Daniels and Mitchell led the group. You know, Clara said, your father would be proud of what's happening here. The chief smiled softly. They don't know, do they? That you're my mother. Clara shook her head. And they don't need to. What matters is, they found their way back to what that badge really means. Across the park, Daniels caught Clara's eye and offered a respectful nod, not seeking approval, but acknowledging the journey. The viral video hadn't disappeared, but it had become something unexpected, a turning point rather than an end point. Redemption wasn't a moment. It was a path, and they were walking it, step by humbled step, with the weight of the badge once again a source of pride rather than burden.